And welcome once again to EWTN's Bookmark. I'm Doug Keck, your host. Our special author and friend is Dr. William A. Donahue, president of the Catholic League. And his book is Why Catholicism Matters, published by Image, a division of Random House. Great to finally get you here on this program now. Now, you've been on EWTN many, many times. It's certainly our great friend and my good friend Raymond Arroyo has had you on for many, many years. And you were on with Father Mitch back a couple of months ago, talking about your fine work and also why Catholicism matters. Now, were you ever down here before on EWTN?
I was back in the 1990s to do some shows, so this is my second trip here.
So were you on with Mother?
And no, I was not.
Okay.
No. Quite frankly, I'm not certain who I was on.
Maybe Jeanette Bankovic's show or
yes,
something?
Yes,
Abundant
yes,
Life,
yes,
probably, I would
think. Yes, I was on with Jeanette, yes.
Okay. Now, you've written several books. Now, how many Catholic books would you say you've written?
Well, this would be the first one that's really strictly Catholic. I mean, I've written 2 books on the American Civil Liberties Union, one on contemporary social and moral problems. I did have a book a few years ago called Secular Sabotage, which talks about secular militants and what they're doing to erode religion from our culture, more or less war stories of my work in the Catholic League. This would be the most defining Catholic statement that I've made.
Now, you've got a doctorate, what's it, sociology?
Sociology, and I've taught political science. And of course, when you do your doctorate on the ACLU and written a couple of books on them, you learn something about constitutional law, particularly First Amendment law, which I've also taught.
Right. Let me ask you, early on, why did you go into sociology?
I think basically, as a young man, even when I wasn't a very good student in high school, I just had this great interest in social dynamics and the culture. And I was very much caught up in the Black civil rights movement and why did we treat blacks the way we did in this country for so long? And that just kind of drew me into sociology. Psychology didn't interest me as much in terms of the individual. I was interested in group behavior for reasons I'm not exactly certain. I do know this much, that when I was in elementary school, I became a lover of jazz music. Okay. And and I began reading a lot about jazz. You can't read about the history of jazz without reading about the history of African Americans. And you can't read about the history of African Americans without touching on the civil rights struggles. Okay. And all of that kind of came together. I think jazz actually, in a strange way, is somewhat of a springboard for me.
Right. Well, let me ask you, when you started to do writing on the ACLU, were you coming at it from a positive position and changing, or had you already decided that maybe you had some concerns?
I was fascinated by the fact that they were so committed to freedom in this country and to civil liberties, but I had some qualms about their more extreme positions. And they intrigued me because my intellectual interest has always been in freedom. More than anything else, my interest is in how do you craft a free society? Well, I thought as a dissertation, maybe I could do a dissertation on organizational change within the ACLU. So I interviewed the founder, Roger Baldwin. I interviewed him in June of '78. He founded the organization in January of 1920. I interviewed the 2 heads of the ACLU at the time. I went through all of their annual reports, the minutes of the board of directors, the FBI files on the ACLU, and I wrote my dissertation. After I wrote my dissertation, and I had this planned ahead of time, that I would rewrite the dissertation, make it more felicitous for the reader, and add material to it that was new and fresh. And the first book was to show how politicized the ACLU is. The ACLU is not a nonpartisan organization. It is the legal arm of the liberal left. And in fact, a few years into their founding, they sued a publication called the American Mercury because they didn't like what they said about them. This is from the guardians and the founders of freedom of speech in this country suing for libel because someone didn't like an article, maybe Roger Baldwin, what they said about them. Oh, I found out an awful lot. And then I wrote another book about them a couple of years later.
It always seems that those people are particularly thin-skinned.
Yes.
Amazingly so, it seems.
I can't tell you how many times in the media I have put out a statement about somebody who said something which I think is patently unfair. And then I get called up. Why didn't you come to me first? And I'm thinking, did you come to me first when you offended my religion? Why is the burden always on me to react to you? Yes, I've never seen more thin-skinned people in my life than people in the media. They can dish it out very well, but they have a very hard time taking it.
Right. Now, you mentioned freedom, and now here you are. You ended up at the Catholic League, and that was that Cardinal O'Connor invited you? How did you get involved in that?
To tell you the truth, I was in Pittsburgh at a small Catholic college out there at the time at La Roche College, and Bishop Wuerl, now the Archbishop, the Cardinal out of Washington, was the Bishop of Pittsburgh. He came to me and said, Bill, I think we need a Catholic League chapter in Pittsburgh. At that same luncheon, the person who was the head of the Catholic League at the time, a layman, he came to me and said, I want you to be the director of communications. And I said, I don't know what's going on here. Make a long story short, the Catholic League was incompetent with the leadership after Father Bloom died in 1990. And I said to Cardinal, at that time, Bishop Worrell, I said, I'm not going to found a chapter of the Catholic League here in Pittsburgh. What I'll do is I'll found an organization similar to what the Catholic League is doing, because they're moribund and they're dying, and we'll become like the new Catholic League. And,
okay.
You know, and that was the whole purpose.
Supplant them, basically. Okay.
At the same time, as I'm doing this, the word got to New York that Donahue is, Mr. ACLU guy, is going to create a kind of a counter to the Catholic League. And they came to me and said, listen, we have an opening for president and CEO. And I was up against 3 other fellows, and they gave me the job. So that's so it was actually Bishop Worrell got me started. And then, of course, I established a great relationship with John Cardinal O'Connor. I can't say enough about him.
Right, great fighter.
Oh, yes.
Gave a lot of
a real
faithful
priest,
in New
a real
York,
priest, too.
A lot to stand up for and feel like you were being stood up for. Let me ask you, so you said freedom, that was a big thing for you, and then you ended up in the Catholic League. And some people would say the problem with the Catholic Church is it's all about non-freedom. It's all about restricting people. How do you put those two together?
I know. I always get this. The Catholic Church is oppressive, it's intolerant and whatnot. I'll get to that in just a sec. If you want to find intolerance, you want to find expressions of intolerance, walk into the local college campus, all right? Try to get into a class in the humanities or in the social sciences or into constitutional law and find out, and then come back and talk to me. The intolerance for a heterodox view in the academy is unbelievable. I served for 20 years on the board of directors of the National Association of Scholars because we're concerned about this. And I say we're, this group, National Association of Scholars, includes former Marxists. These people are liberals, they're conservatives. They might be on different sides on the abortion issue. But they know that the academy, the university, is about the pursuit of truth, not politics. Unfortunately, it's become about the pursuit of politics. And they will stop you from getting tenure, and if you get tenure, they will harass you. The intolerance for a conservative point of view, a traditionalist attitude, let's just say the idea of man and woman getting married, that the intolerance to those people in the classroom is incredible. I don't need any lectures from people about that. If you want to find out where the Inquisition is, go into your local college campus. Now, the Catholic Church, on the other hand, is the fount of liberty. That's where the whole idea of freedom came from.
Right. It's interesting, too, because I almost think that this kind of hippie 60s version of the future, which didn't work in society, they figured out how to make it work on a college campus, and that's their little utopia.
Well, I always say, you know, the professor can create utopia on the blackboard. Of course, utopia translated means nowhere. I wish these people would figure it out. And you see, that's part of where I'm going with this book.
Right.
I do believe, as Jefferson did, in nature and nature's God. But I don't just mean that as a catchphrase. Nature. Either we have a human nature, which is fixed, which you can have cultural changes, or we don't have a human nature, which can be changed by others. Rousseau believed this, the French Enlightenment believed this, and if you disagreed with them, you wind up dead. Right. Same thing has been true in the 20th century. And there's either a God or there's not a God. I believe that there are fixed properties to human nature that are unchangeable, and we better deal with them. And I also believe in God, and we better deal with that as well. That's really at the heart and soul. The Catholic Church understands nature. It understands God. That's why we have the idea of original sin. William Golding understood that in The Lord of the Flies. He said, no, there is original sin. If you take away the civilization, you're not left with the noble savage. He's ignoble. Yeah, well, he's a savage, is for certain.
Well, if you find out about Rousseau's life, you get an idea the guy who came up with this noble savage wasn't so noble.
That's right.
Right? But let me ask you, it says how Catholic virtues can reshape society in the 21st century. So we got Catholic virtues, and you talk about the cardinal virtues, okay? And I first looked at this, it's prudence, justice, fortitude, temperance. I'm thinking, well, are we making our confirmation again? Why did you pick those? It's the cardinal virtues, the hinge virtues, right?
Well, you know, the idea about this book, there's a fellow over there at Doubleday, Trace Murphy was my first editor, okay. And he said, Bill, you know, the country is eager for a book of a more positive statement. We've heard a lot of negative news about the Catholic Church, admittedly sometimes self-generated, but oftentimes it's not, and a lot of lies about the Catholic Church. What about, you know, you wrote a book about, in Secular Sabotage, about fighting back against these people trying to destroy religion and culture. What about a book of a more positive statement about the strengths and the contributions of the Catholic Church? Now, it's interesting. I had completed the research for a different book.
Right.
And
you were pitching that book, right?
Yes.
And then he kind of turned you on to this, right?
Well, he's very polite and basically said, we don't want that one.
Okay.
This idea was better, but what attracted to me about it was two things. Number one, it was a better idea than what I had. Secondly, about 2/3 to 3/4 of the research I had already done could find its way into this book. I had to be reformatted and reconceptualize it, and then, of course, add new material to it. Now, the 4 cardinal virtues, look, people know about sin. We need to know how to conquer sin. We need to know if Catholics, all of us, could follow the teachings of the Catholic Church, we would have the good society. That's what the book is about. People say, well, the philosophers for thousands of years have been wondering, how do we go about the quest for the good society? Hello, people. Time out. It's here. Take a look at the teachings of the Catholic Church. Now, admittedly, they're hard to follow. I'd rather help people clear the bar than to keep dumbing down the bar so we can all clear it. The Catholic Church has the right prescription. Everybody that we know of in the Catholic Church, we've had a scandal in the church as well, every one of those priests who did wrong violated his vows. He didn't follow the teachings of the Catholic Church. The teachings are sound. We don't need to change the teachings. We need to work with the teachers. We need to work with the laity. We need to work with all of us. So I say the Pope goes to confession. We admit that we're sinners, but we also believe in redemption. You know, when Bernard Nathanson, who was the founder of NARAL, and he admitted that he'd lied about the Catholic Church intentionally so they could create legalized abortion. And then he was involved in I don't know how many abortions. He finally realized one day that what he was doing was killing the innocent. It was wrong, and he came clean. And he told the truth. We made up all the lies about all the women who, right before Roe v. Wade, thousands of back alley abortions. There were 39. He said, all those lies we told about the Catholic Church, I made them up. I was so concerned about feeding the abortion agenda. He said, I've got to change, and I'm going to change. I'm a secular Jewish guy, and I'm going to become a Roman Catholic. And they said to him, why Catholicism? Why not Methodism? Why not Mormonism? Why not Islam? He said, because there's no religion that places a higher premium on forgiveness than the Roman Catholic Church. And after what I've done, I want forgiveness.
Right.
I think that's a great statement.
Right, and so we're talking about prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance being the major chapters here. And one of the things I'm thinking about what you're saying is a lot of people would say, well, that's great. You know, I read these things, the church teaches these wonderful things, but there's a lot of hypocrisy. They say them, but they try not to do them. Didn't our Lord say, don't put these extra burdens on people, will be held against you? How do we answer that when people, as you say, they're not living up to it? And then some people say, well, because it can't be lived up to.
Well, I think we do have role models. I talk in this book about a priest, Father Rick Frechette, who's working with the poor in Haiti. We all know about Mother Teresa. We've known about Father Damien. My point is that there's a lot of Mother Teresas out there. They just don't have the platform. There are a lot of heroes out there like Father Frechette. There are people out there who are doing the best work, and those people who are doing the best work because they've internalized the teachings of the Catholic Church. It's become part of their DNA, their own system. So I'm saying is that if you look at the teachings, you look at the encyclicals, are you going to find hypocrisy? Of course you'll find hypocrisy. If the bar is so high that few can clear it, then obviously by definition we're all sinners and we're going to look bad. I'd rather that than to belong to, and I'm not going to mention other religions. I'm not here to bash other religions, but let's say, there's no question. There are major religions out there where the bar is so low, any fool can get over it, okay? They stand for nothing anymore. And that's why they have no members, too. The Catholic Church believes in something, and the more traditional orders are the ones that are gaining members. No, I think it's a tough sell. I admit to that. But the Catholic Church is not this negative, naysaying organization that we've been painted, and I'm trying to put out a positive statement on it. Right.
In your introduction, you say if the Catholic Church has the answer, then there must be something that makes it different from other religions as well as secular institutions. Well, what is different?
Well, as a sociologist, I would say what makes a difference is the organizational genius. I mean, there are many reasons why the Catholic Church is strong, but organizationally, let me just focus on this. On the one hand, if you're going to be global, you have to have some degree of hierarchy. Otherwise, the people in Brazil and Boston will go their own ways. You've got to have some kind of official teaching body at the top. We have the Pope, the Magisterium, the Pope in communion with the bishops. No matter where you are in the globe, from Kansas to Kenya, that has the same application. At the same time, We are not strictly hierarchical. The real heart and soul of the Catholic Church has always been at the parish level, at the community level.
Like politics, right?
Like politics, like I said, what Chip O'Neill said, that all politics is local.
Right.
You ask Catholics, are you concerned about some problems you read about in the paper? Yeah, they're concerned. But you know what they're really concerned about? Their parish, their pastor, their associate pastor, their teachers, their school, because that's what people can identify with. And then they might look out beyond that and to the local ordinary and the like. So we have this beauty. I mean, if you couldn't craft it any better, to have both the hierarchical element for universal teachings and at the same time living the faith at the community level, at the parish level, and often as an ethnic level too, which is nothing wrong with that. It used to be at Irish and Italian and Polish and now Latino enclaves, and yes, they can bring in some of their own acculturation here and there. So I think the flexibility, we haven't gotten enough credit about that. People I meet, including Catholics, think we're a top-down organization. The Pope says something, and then, listen, let me tell you something. There's an awful lot of autonomy. A lot of Catholics sometimes have a hard time understanding that one bishop doesn't report to another bishop.
Right, exactly. Right.
We have a lot of latitudinal work here. I mean, it's not some kind of a dictatorial element. If you want to find dictatorial elements, go talk to your sociologists and their conventions.
Well, one of the things in the introduction you talk about also, you give a quote from a gentleman named Walsh about architecture. The greatest contribution to the church has made to civilization, that is to the human cult of the beautiful. It is an architecture. And then elsewhere, the other thing jumped out at me about Dave Brubeck. You mentioned him, and I didn't realize until we started talking about your love of jazz. But you talk about how, I guess, in the beauty, and with him, the music, that brought him to the church, right?
It's true. Dave Brubeck was brought up in a kind of a lukewarm Protestant family. The author, well, he was Dave Brubeck, Paul Desmond, and Eddie Thigpen. All these guys were Joe Morello and Eugene Wright on the bass, I should say, because I know my jazz. Dave Brubeck was brought up as a kind of a lukewarm Protestant, and he was thinking about becoming Catholic, but he hadn't really made that turn. And one night, one day he decided to put together the Our Father to music. And he showed it to a priest. He said, yeah, but it's incomplete. It's good, but you still haven't gotten the heart and soul. There are parts of the Our Father here that you're leaving out. He said, well, it's kind of difficult for me to figure out a notation. How do I musically do this? Then one night he had a dream, and it came to him how to do it. And he sat down and he put it to paper, and it worked perfectly. And he said, you know what? There's a sign from heaven here. I'm going to make the final leap now. I'm going to become a Roman Catholic. Sometimes the path of people to Catholicism is very circuitous. It's to me, it's fascinating.
Right.
But I thought I'd give the contemporary example, bringing in Brubeck.
You never know what's going to touch somebody. You also talk about the church's focus on the other,
yes,
especially in Catholic social teaching. And then elsewhere you talk about loneliness. From a Catholic perspective, this is a serious problem because it's not in God's design. And that's a big problem today, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Pope Benedict XVI referred to loneliness as a form of poverty. All right? And we think of poverty, we think of materially lacking. He's talking about it in a spiritual dimension. He's talking about it in an emotional, psychological dimension. And you can be with people and still be alone. There's a difference here. A sense of loneliness, that there's nobody out there for you. This is the real problem with so many different people in our society today. Recently, we've had these terrible mass murders on campuses in different cities and the like that we've had. And, you know, fortunately, for most of those people who lost a loved one, they can go back to their families for some type of comfort. The first people I think of are those people who don't have family and who lost one. Who are they going to go to? This is a serious problem in a day and age of radical individualism, which is what we have. We don't have a focus on the other, which is what the Catholic Church teaches. We have a focus on me. You know, Tom Wolfe back in the 70s saw this very clearly. He talked about the me generation. It's only gotten worse. Christopher Lasch, a man of the left, back in the 70s wrote a book called The Culture of Narcissism. It's only gotten worse. I mean, we live in a society today where I walk down the street in New York City, people constantly are walking into me. Why? Because they're texting while they're walking. I have to be careful crossing the street because they're going through red lights while they're on their cell phone. It's a society where the self-absorbed nature has become triumphant. We're celebrating the unencumbered self. We have to have a connection to others, otherwise we're not human. The lone individual is absurd. It doesn't make any sociological sense either. So I think this is a serious problem. The Catholic Church's answer is, Yes, it begins with others. Let me give you the best example I can give them. Freedom for the Catholic Church means the freedom to do what you ought to do. It's the right to do what you ought to do. Notice the teleology, or the ultimate purpose. It's away from me and it's toward you. I have responsibilities, what I ought to do. What do we do in our society? And not just in America, throughout Western Europe, throughout Canada. It's all about the celebration of the individual. It's what I want to do. Don't tell me the freedom is the right to do what I ought to do. Freedom is the right to do what I want to do.
And then not be responsible for the consequences.
And not be responsible for the consequences. Right. Different strokes for different folks. Nothing matters. Nothing's true. Nothing's false. We all make up our own ideas of morality. Well, I mean, people said to me, well, the Catholic Church says conscience matters. I said, yes, but a well-formed conscience. Hitler had a conscience. Pol Pot had a conscience. Right. Jeffrey Dahmer had a conscience. But, conscience is not sufficient. What is the root of the conscience? What is the fount? What is the anchor of the conscience? What are the contours? What is the content of the conscience? Where did it come from? Because you can go to the asylum and you can find people who have a conscience, and what are they doing with it? In that case, you might say these people have a disability, and so we can understand that. What about the people? I always say there's a slim difference between the asylum and the academy. Now, the professors don't have the bailout of saying, well, I have some organic problem, some constitutive problem, which these poor people might have. Right. I'm talking about people who entertain ideas of freedom which are debilitating. You try and act out of society of saying, I do what I want with my body. Promiscuous sex, drugs, eating, whatever I want to do, nobody can tell me what to do. You will not be a happy animal at the end of the day, let me tell you.
Right, and you talk about, obviously, temperance is one of the ones that you talk
Absolutely.
about. The other three cardinal virtues focus on the other, but not temperance focuses inward. The other thing I wanted to jump back to was, I thought, especially when we hear about fairness and things all today, because one of the things is justice. You talk about, you say justice is often confused with treating others equally.
Right, and I get this all the time. Let me give you an example. We just had the Olympics not too long ago throughout the world, and in the Olympics, there was just take the track and field events. I mean, somebody comes in first, somebody comes in second. Same thing in swimming. You see it, they measure it. Now, justice means that you give the silver medal to the person who came in second. Injustice would mean giving the gold to the person who came in second. A greater injustice would be to treat everybody equally. Whoever came in first and whoever came in last, they all get the gold medal. If you're going to have justice, when it deals with some situations, you have to allow for inequality. If I, as a teacher, were to give an A or an F to every student in the class, independent of their achievement, that would be patently unjust. You have to treat people unjustly on the basis of merit. Mm-hmm. Now, when it comes to things like voting, you can't have, I have 2 votes and you have 1. When it comes to equality before the law, we have to have one system for everybody. That demands equality. But the point is this, equity means fairness. Justice means sameness. I'm sorry, equality. Equality means sameness. That means that everyone's treated equally all the time. In terms of the way, in respect before the law, that's good. In terms of voting, that's good. But if you're going to have equity, you can't have equality when it comes to merit. You've got to be able to give the gold to the person who earned it. And I think there's a lot of confusion in this country about that, and I'm trying to show right. The Catholic Church, I think, does a good job.
Well, it's interesting too, because you mentioned in the book about the totalitarian systems out there, where everybody is supposed to be working for the state, except Mao's got all these chalets, but the elites at the top seem to do quite well for themselves. You talk about prudence, and you say prudence, being the most senior of the cardinal virtues, is perhaps the most widely applied virtue. Prudence. But then you go on to say, more commonly we hear the refrain, and I thought this was interesting specifically, from abortion rights advocates, this is under prudence, that no one really likes abortion. One wonders what's not to like about it if the contention is that no one is hurt. In other words, what's holding back their enthusiasm? And you hear that even from good Catholics when they say, well, and they say, well, nobody likes abortion.
Well, if it doesn't take the life of an innocent person, what's the problem with it? I say to people all the time, I said, listen, you've never heard somebody, I give the example in the book, Hillary Clinton, for example, said that abortion is sad and tragic. Now, if somebody has to get a root canal, it's not fun, okay? I've had one done a long time ago. Right. But no one says it's sad and tragic. Mm-hmm. if you need it, go and get it done. You need a polio shot, get it done. If we know why abortion is sad and tragic, and they know it. A pregnant woman is not carrying an elephant. It's not a shoe inside of her body. We live in a world of fiction. And I made this point to somebody recently, a big name person in the liberal media. I said, I'm not going to play the fictional game. You know and I know that a pregnant woman is carrying a human being. You know and I know that two men can't get married. Marriage, the purpose of marriage is to have family. Two people of the same sex can't get married. And I went through a whole litany of these things. That we are living in a world of fiction where we're pretending. When Rosie O'Donnell says that I'm going to go meet my husband, and her husband is a woman, we know that's a fiction, don't we? I mean, even they have to know that doesn't work. And the same thing is true with abortion. Everybody knows. As I point out, people say, well, all right, it may be life and it may not be. Why wouldn't you err on the side of caution? When I see a big empty box in the street and children playing, I know that when I'm driving down the street, there's a good chance a child may be inside the box. So prudence tells me I should go around the box as opposed to over it, because they might kill an innocent human being. If there's even a shred of doubt as to whether or not there's a baby there, why don't we err on the side of caution?
Well, let me ask you one question just before we go. Just as a writer, you're so busy. You're out on these TV shows. You're putting out The Catalyst. When do you find time to write?
It's not easy, believe me. And I've been reluctant to do it because for some number of years, I took a long time before I wrote Secular Sabotage, and a couple of years after this. I can only really write when I'm on vacations, which I don't take any vacations practically in the last several years. Maybe on a weekend to choose one day. It's very, very difficult. But I am a workaholic. And once I make up my mind I'm going to do something, look out. I'm going to get it done. It was inside of me. It had to come out.
Do you have another book inside?
Not right now.
Not right now?
A break.
Okay, you think you've had it. But you've got a lot of other work to do. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Dr. Donahue, speaking here with the one and only Dr. William A. Donahue, President, the Catholic League, Why Catholicism Matters, published by Image, division of Random House, available through the EWTN Religious Catalog. We highly recommend you check this book out. Check us out next time right here on EWTN's Bookmark.